This is the unending story of a man, a cursed man with the task of journeying across many worlds, realities, timelines. While lest be not and on thou persist on the folly of a gaming most epic. To what ends doth this journey fall? May knowledge find us, for on the 546th day we enter the Zodiac Age. Welcome, it's good to be back talking about mainline Final Fantasy. It's been a minute, but I think 12 has always been a sort of black sheep of the franchise when talking about the mainline titles. There's a lot that people know, even if they're not in the realm of Final Fantasy, about the other games. Like 10, you probably know it's that one with the weird kid and the girl laughing on the balcony. You probably know that 13 is the one with the girl with the pink hair. But what do you know about 12? I asked myself this question before starting. What do you think about when you think of Final Fantasy XII? And I pictured nothing. There's nothing from this game that I know. I don't think there's anything that has tapped in to the public zeitgeist, the overall social awareness of Final Fantasy and non-Final Fantasy fans. I wonder why that is. But first I have a re-release spotlight, which I haven't done in a long time. I haven't been keeping up with the amount of remakes that have been coming out during the timeline that we're in. They've remade every 2D game at this point. 4, 5, and 6 were on the Game Boy Advance remakes, that's cool. They remade 1 and 2 for the PS1, like only a couple years ago when the PS2 was alive and well. They remade them for PS1 and didn't port them. And then they remade 1 and 2 again in the Dawn of Souls Game Boy Advance cart. Then they remade 1 and 2 again, anniversary editions exclusive to the PSP, and they stayed that way for a long time. But the major important release was the 3D DS remake of Final Fantasy III. Just wanting to make a note here, during the release of 12, it precedes 12 by I think a couple months. This is the first time in US history that Final Fantasy III was playable. Americans still knew Final Fantasy III was the Super Nintendo game that was actually 6 for the longest time. Final Fantasy VI Advance came out, and that ended up being what we knew as 3, so it's like, what's going on? And then a 3D DS remake of FF3 came out, and that was finally the real FF3. No 2D version was ever made available until last year with the Pixel remake, which some say is the definitive version of 3. Finally, all 6 original games for the first time were available just in time for the release of the 12th. So what's the big gimmick with Final Fantasy XII? There's a few, but one of the interesting things is that it's part of the Rerelease Alliance, which you might know as the Final Fantasy Tactics universe. A cool idea to expand this universe even more by giving it the full budget treatment of a mainline Final Fantasy title. The original Tactics is a beloved game for its story and gameplay. When I played it on the show, I was a little overwhelmed and a little bit bothered. And then when I played the sequel, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, I enjoyed that a bit more and realized a lot of the problems I had with Tactics I think were pretty valid. I bring up Tactics Advance because that game was the one that really established the world of Rerelease a bit more. It introduced different races like the Viera, the Numo, the Banga. It showed you the Mughals that looked very strange and not like what we're used to in Final Fantasy. It kind of established more of a world. And I bring this up because nobody really talks about Tactics Advance over Tactics Original. But 12 takes inspiration from Final Fantasy Tactics Advance much more than it does the original Tactics. But the world in Tactics Advance all took place inside of a storybook, not in reality. So I wonder if this implies that all of 12 takes place in a book. The main opening chapters of this game is narrated in book format and even shows you like a title of a book in the corner. These are the types of perspectives you can get when you play every single game in order. I called Tactics Advance filler in the video I made, but now I'm seeing like it was kind of pretty important, at least to the 12 series. So the story follows a young boy named Vaughn who wants to be a sky pirate. He meets up with some sky pirates along with a few other characters, and they go on quests to try and stop the Empire from sort of taking over the world of Rerelease with an iron fist. It is a bit of a less fantastical, more grounded Final Fantasy story, which is what we've come to expect if you've played the original Tactics. That's kind of what Rerelease is about. The gameplay is another important gimmick. There's a lot to talk about. My main takeaway when I first started was, wow, this game looks, feels, and kind of plays like Final Fantasy XI if it weren't an MMO. Large bustling cities with tons of NPCs, a much more living and breathing sort of world than something like 10. These blue crystals scattered throughout where you can save your progress and teleport around, walking across large fields. The auto battle system, it feels a lot like 11. And because 11 was always in development, 11 actually borrowed a lot from 12, which we'll talk about in a bit. I really was expecting 11 to be totally separated. I'd probably never reference it again, but this 11 and 12 are very closely developed, it seemed. Like the two teams might have borrowed some stuff from each other, is what I'm saying. But let's try to keep this organized. Let's start by talking about one system in particular, the license and jobs system. You earn experience points in this game just like any other, but you also earn license points. And this is where the character growth aspect comes in. Somewhat similar to the sphere grid in 10, but a little bit more complicated. It does seem like 12 was a direct response to people saying 10 was too simple, too linear, too easy. This license board thing is a little different depending on the version of the game that you played. So also like 10 and 10.2, there was an international re-release version with updated stuff. I don't know why they kept doing this during the PS2 era, but it was a thing apparently. It was called Final Fantasy XII International Job System. They made sure they put that in the title to make people know, like, hey look, we put like a job system. We actually did some cool new stuff in this game. The job system makes the license board system work a little differently because you actually choose a job and then you only have access to a few types of things, and every job is a certain kind of board with certain abilities available to you. This same system was carried over in Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age, which is the full-on remake released for the PS4 internationally in all regions. That's the version I played. It's very shiny, it's very pretty. But some hardcore fans who played 12 back in the day say that this new version of the license board is less complex and more limiting. And you used to have a lot more freedom with which abilities you were allowed to equip to which character, but now you're kind of locked into these quote-unquote jobs that aren't as really sophisticated as you might think because they were a bit of an afterthought. Jobs weren't in the original 12, but the Zodiac Age is the version everybody knows now, so it's kind of rewritten history. Vaughn was a knight white mage. Balthier was a foe breaker, archer. Fran was a time battle mage and a shikari. Bosch was an ulan and a monk. Ash was a white mage and a bushi, and Penelo was a red battle mage / black mage. Some of my job choices were better than others, like Bash for instance. He was a monk, and he ended up being the tank. So, a lot of damage, high health, and when I got the choice for a second job, I chose the one, didn't really care about the abilities for the second one, I just chose the one that had the license board that gave a lot more health and more attack. So that's all he was doing. He wasn't doing anything crazy by the end, he was just an attacker. He just beat people with a pole, and it worked out really nice. Other characters, I just did not know what to do for the second job, because I didn't know what I was focusing on for everybody, so some of them were a little bit wasted, and I feel like I screwed up, but we were fine by the end. We were a good team. Because committing to a job in this game does not mean that much. It doesn't mean as much as it means in 11, for sure. Or even 10. But my advice for people going in is that don't care too much about the jobs. Have a varied group. Don't give everybody the same job. Obviously you need a white mage or two or 3. I went hard on white mages. I had 2 white mages and then like 2 other characters who had a lot of white magic. Just have a good balance is my advice, which is what I did, and it worked out very nicely. Because a job title in this game is nothing more than a type of board that you get. The main important difference you'll find is that each job pretty much has a weapon that only they can use, and you might end up being able to use a couple different weapons like late game, but otherwise you're sticking, like the monk has poles, that's his weapon of choice. The black mage will have staves. The knight has swords. The time battle mage has crossbows and they kick ass. I like the time battle mage. So what the license board is kind of a skill tree, but it's not a tree. It is just, it's like a tree if there were a million different branches. Every single space is a thing that you can spend license points on. You start in the middle, and whatever you gain, you can now unlock things around it, and you can just go in whatever direction. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory. The farther you go in this direction, you'll be seeing all the different weapon upgrades. You'll see armor upgrades over here, accessory upgrades, and then up here is like, you'll have all the stat increases that you're gonna wanna go for. And that's where you spend your LP, license points. It was an interesting change of pace. I actually enjoyed it a lot when I figured it out, because in the early half of the game, I was not really sure what I was doing, just kind of upgrading whenever. Treating it like a normal skill tree, which was not the idea. The idea is you should probably hoard your LP until you need it. Spend the LP on health increases and stuff like that, but don't just get every single upgrade of like armor level 2, armor level 3, armor level 4, because you also need to spend actual money to buy the armor if it's available in the shop, which it might not be. Getting a new item in this game, finding it in the wild, is never exactly a fun, oh, new item kind of moment, because you never know what it means. You just got obtained name, and you don't know what the name is associated with. You don't know if it's a piece of armor or a weapon, or who can equip it, if anybody. So you gotta dig through your inventory and go like, okay, that's the new item I got. It's a crossbow. Time Battle Mage does that, so try to equip it. Can't. Need level 3. Okay, go to license board. I have level 1. I don't want level 2. I want to try to skip over to get 3 so I could kind of go around it and get some more useful upgrades up here, then upgrade level 3, and then I can equip the crossbow. And it's like, it's a lot just to equip an item. That's also only if you have the LP to do it. Lot of pausing and checking things in this game. If you're not a fan of that, you might want to stay away. So it's a cool change of pace to upgrading characters in an RPG, but it doesn't always work out the way you want. For instance, like the job names, like such as Foe Breaker. Foe Breaker, as advertised to you, is a job that focuses on debuffing enemies. Lowers their resistance to magic, lowers resistance to attack, lowers their attack, stuff like that. And it's like, oh, that seems like a good guy to have on your team. A Foe Breaker will use hammers as weapons and just have high attack. Debuffing people while hitting them hard sounds like a good class. But then all of those abilities were so far on the ends of the license board. So I was like, how do you define a job like this and it's never even going to work until like endgame? And then I get to endgame and I've unlocked the license for that ability and realize, oh, but I don't own the ability, because everything in this game needs to happen 2 or 3 times. So like, you get the license to equip a weapon, but you need the weapon, like I just said earlier with the crossbow. So I unlocked the license. Basically, I'm allowed to use this ability, but I need to get the ability, and I've never seen it in a shop or anything like that. So I look it up online, and it's like, yeah, you can only get these abilities in like an end game, post game area. The entire namesake of the job is you never use it. You never use it in the whole game. My Foe Breaker did nothing but beat people with hammers, never once used a special, unique ability to himself. In fact, I could say that for most of my guys, except for the mages. White Mage was always healing and buffing. Black Mage was always using super nuke attacks when they could. Time Battle Mage was always using haste. But other than that, any of the other, like there's like a samurai, there's like a ninja-esque class, none of those abilities seem to have mattered that much. Let's be real, most of the time we're just whacking people in the heads with hammers, swords, poles, crossbows, staves, anything. Just hit the enemies in the head. That's what you gotta do. So license board, in conclusion, it's not something you should stress about. Aside from weapon choice, I never felt like it was a big focus for any characters. Most of my characters were the same except for the mages. As long as you're prepared for the journeys ahead, you'll be fine. And that's a key element to this game too. You start off in the main centerpiece town, Rerelease, and it serves as a layout for most of the big towns to follow. There's a shop for every particular need you might have. And when you first need to go on your first quest, you might think of it like you think of any other game. I'm gonna walk over here to this town, and then I'm gonna go to a dungeon, and then I'm gonna come back. But that's not really how it is. What I didn't expect was the amount of time that would take. The journeys in this game really feel like journeys, and that is a cool part that I haven't really experienced before. You know, Final Fantasy X, straight line all the way through. You're gonna be constantly checking into a town, doing a thing, and then getting to a town. In 12, when they say, we have to go here, they like to treat these things as realistically as possible. So they pull out a map and go like, okay, we need to get over to this area, which will cause us, we'll have to go through, if we want the shorter path, really the shorter path is through the forest. So we go to the forest, and they're planning out this whole thing in a cutscene, and you're like, okay, I'm just gonna go there, right? And then 5 hours later, you make it. Like, it actually takes that long to walk to a place in this game, and that's kind of cool. What I wasn't prepared for was there's no towns or check-ins or shops. There might be tiny shops where you can buy potions and Phoenix Downs, but nothing important. And by the time I made it to the end of these little journeys, I was fighting bosses and stuff that I really felt like I was not prepared for because my characters were just a little weak, and those were the hardest boss fights in the game, harder than the end game stuff, because by the end I knew what I was doing. But this is a pro tip, like, you gotta prepare for real, you gotta buy stuff. And you don't get money in this game, at least not a lot, for beating enemies. The money works in this game by selling loot. You get loot for enemies, and I don't think the loot matters for anything other than like side quest stuff, so you just sell it all, and that's how you make your money. And important things can be very expensive in this game too. Like, I was paying 100 grand for a crossbow at the end of the game. Likely during early game, you're not going to be prepared to fill out every character with a brand new weapon, a shiny chest plate armor, and a helmet. It's just not going to work. There's like an Oregon Trail aspect of the game because Rerelease has a shop for everything. This is where you get your spells. This is where you get your abilities, armor, weapons, Gambits. We'll talk about Gambits in a second. And in cutscenes and through dialogue, your characters will be like, all right, let's make sure we're really prepared for this journey coming up. And you think they're just saying that because they're adventurers and it's, you know, it's a story. You think that it's just flavor, but it's not. That's like the game telling you, hey, you need to be prepared. You're not coming back for hours. There's a teleportation system. It uses consumable items, and I never liked doing it, so there are ways, but still. So that is character growth. It is very much an evolution for the series. It's the most complex, it's the most involved, most interesting, I think, in all of the main lines. But let's talk about the actual gameplay, because that's also complicated. They revamped it again. Everybody knows ATB, Active Time Battle System, been in place since Final Fantasy IV. It wasn't in 10, and then in 11 they were like, we're gonna do an RTB battle system, real-time battle system. And then in 12, introducing ADB, Active Dimensional Battle System. This is like the evolution of ATB. Everybody still has an ATB bar that fills up, and then they can do an action. But the difference is, everybody just does it. In the old games, whoever fills their bar first basically gets put into the stack, and then you can go, and then you can go, and then it goes in that order. In this game, you basically choose an attack, and then wait for the bar to fill, and then when it fills, the character does that attack in real time. Meaning every character and enemy in battle is constantly doing their own thing independently. They're also moving around the board, which is something you can do now just like in 11. You have 3 people in your party at once. There could be any number of enemies attacking you, and you gotta maintain all that in your head. How the heck do you keep track of 3 people moving at the same time? The answer is Gambits. Gambits are the big gimmick here. What they are, basically, are what coders know as if statements. If statements that you could apply to your characters as if programming their AI. For instance, they could be simple or complex. You know, if there is an enemy attack enemy. You know, you just program them to do certain things, so you don't even need to command them in battle. It's all figured out beforehand. You can have things like, if ally status equals dead, use raise. You know, like keep everybody alive. If health falls below 40% or 50, or it covers all 10 through 100, use cure or cura or curaga, depending on the level of health lost. On the license board, there are little spaces that gain you additional Gambit slots, so you can keep filling and filling and filling, and the logical order of which they are sorted matters as well. So if you have attack enemy on top and cure yourself when below 50% or something on the bottom, you're never going to cure yourself because there's always an enemy there. And you're always going to be attacking the enemy, prioritizing. So you have to put cure on top so that if in the event cure can happen, the AI will do it. But in the meantime, they will attack. It's all a logic system. It is a super, super neat idea in theory. It's really cool. I've never played a game like that. And keeping a goal in mind to sort of never have to lift a finger in battle. At a certain point, when you've gained enough Gambits, and you know what you're doing, and you know how the game works, you can walk into battle and just go like, all right guys, handle it. And they do. Or at least that's the dream, because I do have a little bit of problems with this Gambit system. The question is, how do you build the perfect AI for every fight? The answer is you can't. Every fight's different. Most wild battles, you can go your way with just making sure you attack, and then heal. That's the same for most RPGs, but when it comes to bosses, you're gonna need to reprogram your Gambits for most of them. It's kind of like a deck building game at that point. Make sure you have the right cards that you need that'll counter this enemy the right way. If you're using a physical attack and this boss is immune because he's like a magic guy, you have to restructure your code essentially. It never worked perfectly, and of course, in the middle of battle when your Gambits are active, you can still overwrite any action by selecting the character and saying stop, do this instead. In the case of emergency or something, you're always able to take priority. In previous active time battle system games, there's always an option, at least in the remakes, there's an option in the menu to set it towards active or wait. And active means while you're selecting an attack or a magic spell, you're going through the menu, then the game time is still moving, so you're allowed to be attacked during that time. You need to be fast, it's part of the challenge. In my opinion, you always should play with active on. If you set it to wait, then the time bars stop filling while you're selecting, so it's like it's way easier. You get to spend as much time as you want, but in my opinion, that kind of turns it into a turn-based battle anyway, so what's the point? But in this game, I turned wait on, because when everybody's moving at once, how do you keep active on? Unless my Gambits are working, that's fine, but if I'm trying to select something, by the time I choose an attack, my other guys are already doing something that might be the wrong thing that they shouldn't be doing. I mentioned pausing earlier. This is where pausing happens a lot too. Another interesting thing you can do in 12 is swap your party freely mid-battle instantly, which is very weird. You could also change Gambits on the fly. So I had my time battle mage saying, prioritize slowing down the enemies, use slow. And it was a couple turns into battle where I realized she just kept using slow and it just wasn't working. It just kept missing. And I was like, oh my God, she's being useless right now. So I had to pause the game, change the Gambit, move that down, move something else up in place of it. You're constantly editing your Gambits. It never goes as smoothly as you might hope. It can be a little exhausting. So basically the Gambit system, they've made a gameplay system that is objectively super interesting, but kind of feels unnecessary at times. Like if I'm sitting here and commanding basically everybody to do something aside from attacking and healing, then it's not much different than a previous game, and you're constantly at war with your own laziness. For small time battles, like I'll change my Gambits for bosses, but when it comes to wild battles, I don't want to sit there and go through and recode things, you know what I'm saying? And I know if I did, the battle would go easier, but I'm too lazy. So I just sit there and watch my guys whack each other with hammers. Yeah, you'll figure it out, I didn't do well in coding classes in college. I'll just say that. Honestly, the closest thing this battle system reminds me of is Final Fantasy XI. It really is. The single player aspect of, remember, summoning characters to help you and they kind of work on their own and you have no effect over them. How much more fun 11 would have been if there was a Gambit system in 11. And you can actually somewhat command those people instead of having them do random things and just waiting, just watching and waiting for the battle to end. This is a step up for sure, but it was still a little annoying. Another sacrifice we have because of the Gambit system and the party system is that you can no longer heal in menu. You can't use any spells in menus. They have to be live, real time. So if you've played any Final Fantasy game, you know how easy it is to just go to the menu, hit cure, split cast it, boom, everybody's healed up. It's a whole process every time in this game. You have to command them and wait for them to do it. I didn't want to program them to heal themselves at like under 80% or something, because then they'd be curing the entire time. They'd never stop curing. They'd waste all their MP. So I would do it manually a lot, and it takes just a little too long for the amount of times you have to heal, which is like almost every battle. This is where I must mention, thank God for 4 times speed. I've mentioned the speed boost in every game. I mean, really, when you think about it, the one main thing that people don't like about RPGs is just waiting for things. There's so much waiting. That's why they implement these time boosting systems in ports and remakes of these games. But in 12, I think 12 is the first Final Fantasy game that had a speed boost in the original version. You could double time speed. That's how slow things take in this game. They knew from the start. And in the remake, they said, let's add 4 times speed because it was not fast enough. At this point in the video, like, if you're somebody who doesn't like micromanaging, there's so much of that. If you're somebody who doesn't like waiting, this is not the Final Fantasy game for you. I spent so much time in 4 times speed. What was it, like 44 hours I spent on this game? Still the longest game. Aside from 11, it's the longest time I've spent on any game in this whole show. With the amount of time I spent in 4 times speed, I'd imagine if I didn't have that, we'd have to be at like 60 hours. For real. Because it's pretty much every wild battle I'm just speed up. Yeah, I mean, why should I watch it? You know, I'm just killing the guy and moving on. I'm running across the field, nothing's happening, 4 times speed. I'm healing my guys, I'm buffing my guys, 4 times speed. I can't imagine how I'd probably hate this game if I wasn't able to boost through things. Wait, yes I could. I can imagine that because that's exactly what 11 was. 169 hours I spent in that game, didn't I? Everything did click by the end. It's a slow-paced game, but it also took me a long time to slowly figure out all these tiny little tips and things that I learned along the way. By the time I reached like the final big dungeon, I knew all of the things I was supposed to do, and I just murdered everybody in there, and the final boss was a piece of cake. I barely had lifted a finger during that. I didn't even mention the new limit break system. There's like always an evolution of limit break. This time it's called Quickenings, where it's like you have like a 5-second timer to choose an attack, and it's all your team's limit breaks at the same time. And once they run out of magic, you can charge it, but you have to be ungodly fast with the buttons to do it correctly. And every time you hit a button, you watch like a whole limit break attack. Too many cutscenes. You can watch like 5 or 6 cutscenes on average during that moment. It takes too long. I didn't use it a whole lot. There's a little bit of a summoning system where you summon the espers that you gain along the way. And when you summon them, you actually get to play as them and command them like a party member, which is super cool. Some of the coolest ways that summoning works in the whole series, in my opinion, but I also never used it. I don't know. Again, it took a long time for that whole process to happen. And when I'm fighting a guy, most of the time my Gambits are doing the work and I'm good. So I didn't summon a whole lot. And that's the gameplay. Check. We did all the gameplay. That's the whole thing. We didn't even talk about story. The story, the world, the environment, the production value, how does it all play in? Well, it is the biggest, it is the flashiest, highest budget. I did play a PS4 remake, so... But still, this is a grounded medieval, fittingly tactics, fittingly Ivalice story. Not a lot of godlike beings. Not a lot of magic, still a good amount though. Basically, lord dies, the empire's invading. Any story with an empire, the empire's evil. Princess Ashe of Dalmasca marries a prince. The prince gets murdered. The prologue of the game, you start playing this character named Rex. You're trying to defend the castle and you realize that the empire's here for a treaty signing or something. But then you find out that they might be trying to actually kill the king and you're like, oh no, so you gotta like climb the tower. And then you make it there and the king has died by the hands of Captain Bash. Betrayal. You see Captain Bash killing the king basically, and then you get killed by the king. Rex is dead, and then it flashes forward. Rex was the brother of Van, main character, little quirky boy from Rabanastri. Reports are published of Captain Bash being executed for his crimes, and Princess Ashe committing suicide because she lost her beloved prince. Van goes on his little quest to steal an ancient magicite from the castle, runs into a couple of sky pirates by the name of Balthier and Fran.
Who are you? I play the leading man. Who else?
Fran, a bunny girl, aka a Viera, our new race, introduced in Tactics Advance. They get chased out by the guards, they land in the sewers, they find a girl by the name of Amalia, and they guide her out of there as well. But then they get caught and then arrested, and they find Bash in prison. Hey, we thought you got executed. Why did you thought you got executed? Also, you killed my brother. Van like tries to put on a tough guy act, but he's like a wimp. No, dude, they didn't kill me. I'm Captain Bash from Dalmasca. I didn't kill anybody. My twin brother, posing as me, killed them, and he didn't get executed either because he's in on it with the Empire. It's a whole conspiracy, you gotta believe me. And they're like, oh, okay. And then Amalia turns out, she's like, my name's not Amalia, I'm actually Ashe. And no, I didn't commit suicide either, I'm also alive. And you're like, so now what, we gotta stop the Empire? And basically, yes. That accounts for 5 party members of 6. Van, Balthier, Fran, Ashe, Bash. The 6th one is Penelo. She's Van's sister who comes along for the ride. That's her story. And therein lies my first criticism of these characters, this party. None of them have like a particularly gripping personality, except for Balthier. I liked him a lot. People compare this game a lot to Star Wars. It's a bit of a meme that Final Fantasy XII is just like Star Wars. I don't know if the story is exactly the same, but you can see that Balthier is Han Solo. And I guess that means Fran is Chewbacca. But let me tell you, man, Van is no Luke. In my opinion, Van is like the worst main character in Final Fantasy history. He has nothing going for him. He's happy-go-lucky a little bit like Tidus, but he's not as charming in my opinion. And Tidus also has like an arc and a couple of twists and turns and a couple of big major connections to the story. Van is a kid whose brother was murdered by the Empire, so there's his like motivation. But other than that, he's like, I want to be a sky pirate, and he's just like a little kid gazing at everything. When he, oh, this is so cool, wow, we're in a cool place. He doesn't do anything. There's no crazy twists with him. He's just like, you know, like a wall. Hello. I'm sorry. I have to pause right there. As I was researching and editing, I looked a little bit into the background and saw that Van, the character as a concept, was forced upon the developers during development, late into development. Apparently Bosch, or some version of Bosch, was supposed to be the protagonist, and looking at how his character plays into the story, it does make a lot of sense. Apparently, executives forced the developers to change the protagonist to a young boy because he is the most marketable, or that is the most marketable demographic. So the story was already planned out, already being worked on, and they had to shoehorn in this boy just so it could apparently sell more. I love executives. Shouts out to Final Fantasy XVI starring like a 30-year-old dude. Balthier and Fran, they're a good duo. Fran's voice, I don't know how I feel about Fran's voice. I like it and hate it at the same time. It's a very unique voice, I'll say.
The Dynast King took his sword from the Ocuria. It was here he claimed the Nethicite. He must have known he was not the last the Ocuria would choose. He left this for you.
The voice acting in general, not great. Is it just me? Again, Vaughn in particular, his voice actor, I don't know who this guy is. He's not that good. I'm sorry. He's a lot of like dud line reads in this game.
I told you, I'm going to take back what's ours. Give back to Dalmasca. Come on, what do you think? If I find something, and it fetches a good price, how about I buy you all dinner?
Oh, please.
Well, that does it.
Balthier, yeah, he was my favorite. Lots of personality, lots of funny quips. He fits the Han Solo but medieval character very well.
I hope you haven't forgotten my role in this little story. I'm a leading man.
I'd say you're in more of a supporting role.
Fran, please.
Penelo, even more boring than Vaughn. Literally, it just feels like she was, we need another 6th party member. I don't know, I guess let's make Vaughn have a sister, and she's here. I don't even know what her motivation is outside of like, I'm gonna help my brother. She has a little bit of a love interest at some point with one of the NPCs, but that's it. It doesn't even go that far. It's like she's got nothing. Captain Bosch is kind of cool. I get his motivation, but again, he's like a stern, stoic guy. There's no single memorable scene that comes to mind with him. And then we have Ash, the final character. She I kind of liked. She absolutely robs Vaughn of main character status. She's basically the real major, like, it's about her. She's like the one that starts the whole party and says we have to do this. She's the actual political figure that has any sort of power in the group. And the main quests of the game are about her getting items and making decisions that will lead to the salvation of Dalmasca and Ivalice. Vaughn is just there.
King Wraithwall stood here. With this sword, he cut the Suncrest and took its power in his hand.
But you're going to use the sword to destroy the Suncrest. Aren't you, Ash?
Don't interrupt me, Vaughn.
And so they go on these quests to stop the Empire, to stop Vayne, the entitled son of the previous king, trying to take over the world, manufacturing Nethicite, which is these magic like rocks that have superpowers basically, and they use that power to step on people and be powerful. And there's this guy that's helping Vayne create these artificial magicite, artificial power rocks. I think his name is like Dr. Sidolphus. That's right, I think the first time ever, we got Sid working for the enemy side. Dr. Sid, slave to the Nethicite, father of Balthier, working for the Empire, creating these rocks, working side by side with Vena, ancient god-like being who's trying to manipulate people to do certain things, but you expect the twist of like the gods just gonna be using you as a puppet. But no, they're real legit partners, the two of these guys. Sid is not technically the main villain, he's not the leader of the Empire. That's Vayne. But he's like the guy who's causing everything bad. He's the mad scientist behind it all. He's the Hojo of the story. He doesn't have a lot of screen time until the end, but man, he is a mad, sinister Sid like we've never seen. He is a top-ranking Sid in my book. I thought we've seen all the good Sids at this point. We were gonna get some like filler Sids. No. We got an evil Sid. I was so happy to see that. That was awesome.
What's that? The Princess of Dalmasca come to visit. She's not entirely without merit. A test of sorts for our princess?
You're a babbling fool.
A trial for a Shelia Banargan Dalmasca!
There's another guy that works with us. His name is Al Sid, like AL-Sid. He's like a cool, laid-back guy. And I don't know if they were trying to like compensate, like, well, this Cid's evil, so we have to make sure we have a good Cid. So this is Al Cid. Nah, in my opinion, he doesn't count. He's not a real Cid. The real Cid is the crazy maniac shooting like a Gatling gun at us while he's summoning a demon.
No pity for me! Stand and fight!
That's the real Cid. And that's how the story goes. We go on many journeys trying to find these MacGuffin objects. It's not like 8 gems. It's just that the story keeps changing. Like first we have to get this stone. Stone doesn't work. They stole the stone. Now we gotta get like a sword, a magic sword that has the power to kill the stones, and then we have to keep finding things. The story ends up being about Ash and whether or not she wants to enact revenge for all the pain that the Empire has caused, or attempt to find peace in the situation. How far will you go for revenge? So it's a revenge bad story, but it's a little more nuanced. I genuinely don't see the Star Wars comparisons, at least plot-wise. There are some characters that are very, very close, but there's the Empire, which is evil, but there's not. The plot is not Star Wars. I don't know what the people are saying. And now we just gotta get into the final concluding thoughts here. The next mainline Final Fantasy, number 12. What do we all think? If you're into micromanaging, you like the way these characters get built up, you like the licensing board, you like programming your characters, that sort of thing, like this, it's certainly a unique battle system. You might like this game a lot. Is it underrated? I guess so, kind of. For a mainline Final Fantasy, I think it is underrated. Like I said at the top of the show, like, nobody knows much about this unless you're into Final Fantasy. I mean, whose favorite is 12? Be real, right? I want to hear from you, for real. If you're like, no, my favorite game's 12. 12's the best one. I would love to hear from you. In my opinion, there's too much of the micromanaging. This game lacks a level of goofiness and wonder that a lot of Final Fantasies have. There's not a particularly diverse cast of characters. Just look at them. Look at all 6. You have one character that's non-human race, and she's just a girl with bunny ears. The rest of the characters practically look the same. They're just people, they're just guys in armor. I see concept art or like the cover art, and I have to take a second to realize who that is. Like, oh, that's Balthier, not Bosch. Like they look so similar. Compared to Final Fantasy X, like look at these guys. You can look at this cast and determine like a little bit of what they're all about, their personality, just by looking at them. Can you do that with 12? It's a little boring. The battle system can be exhausting with the amount of times you have to go into menus and change things. You can't heal in the menus is another really annoying thing. You really have to learn how to manage the Gambit system as best as possible, and if you can't do that, you're gonna hate this game. I can really see how this didn't blow up the same way 10, 11, and 13 did. I got that level of satisfaction towards the end of all my understanding of the game coming together and my characters being very powerful, but it didn't feel as satisfying as games in the past. I remember at the end of 10, I felt like I was a god killing everything. Same with 5. And I was just as strong in 12, but I didn't feel that satisfied because I was still kind of pausing the game, changing things here or there. I was fighting the same way I was fighting throughout the game, or I was not participating in the fight and just watching. ×4 speed, the speed boost element of modern or new ports of old RPGs, it's a controversial thing because I know that keeping the ×2, ×4 speed on for too long can be immersion breaking. When people tell me that, like, oh yeah, I never turn that off the entire game, I played the entire game in 2 times speed, I'm like, did you even like read? Did you even get into the story? Did you even look at anything? Or did you just speed as fast as possible? You didn't even see anything. So I really try to manage how I use speed boosts. I only do it for like, okay, I fought this battle a million times, cut it. But this game, I left it on for so long because a lot of it is just that monotonous. Like I would never turn ×2 speed on for for a final boss. That's the climactic moment. But I did in this game. And the reason was there were no other buttons to press. My guys were doing the work, and I was like, okay, the battle's just going. I mean, I'm watching it, but like, I just like, now I'm going faster. Now they're beating faster. Because I just wanted to see him die. Like, I didn't treat it as a climactic moment of all of my learnings coming together. Let's go, let's fight. Oh, he's getting us. It was like super easy, and I just sat there and watched. Is it my fault that I wasn't as immersed because I was using ×4 speed? Or was I already not immersed because the game literally told me that I should just sit here and watch patiently? It wasn't very climactic, I guess, is what I'm saying. As for all those reasons, this game I think is the game I'm least likely to replay in the entire series. However, it's the game I'm most interested in continuing post-game. Every game in the series has super bosses, extra side quests, post-game content. This one has a lot. A lot of them are hunts, these like bounty hunts, where you have to track down a certain enemy, adapt your strategy to them, and defeat them, and then report back and get a reward. I've done a few of those. I didn't talk about them, but they're pretty fun. They get pretty complicated too. So I think that is maybe the thing I'm missing. I was looking for a more intense battle that maybe I would find in the post-game, and with all the knowledge I knew, I was not really using all that knowledge to fight the final boss. It was easy enough to just watch them go alone. But I fought some intense battles along the way in like the mid-game section of the game. So yeah, like there's a lot still out there that I can explore and find secrets and defeat big enemies. There's like a notorious final boss that has 20 million HP and takes like hours to beat. That, I think, is what this game is at its peak. But it's hidden, stuffed away in post-game territory. So if you are the type of guy who likes to dig deep, spend a lot of time learning a game and figuring it out beyond just beating the final boss, again, you'll probably really like this game. For me, it was really cool, it was unique, it was fun to see. But if this was like the normal for Final Fantasy, this became the normal system going forward, I'd get over it. I'd be over it already. I don't need more than one. I'm glad I got 10-2. I'm interested to see 13-2 and 3. But I don't need a 12-2. I guess I'm glad 12 never got any real sequels. Hey.
Hey man, long time no see. Heard you beat 11, heard you did a whole bunch of Final Fantasy games while I was gone. How did that go? How did 11 go? I feel like I never could have done 11. I mean, I did. But how'd that go?
Yeah. I mean, you saw.
Alright.
Yeah, so like, why are you still around doing stuff? What are you doing?
Well, I'm just making sure, you know, I got my eye on you. So, come to deliver this. Heard you might forget.
Final Fantasy XII on DS.